Okay.
Thank you. In a previous paper, which I gave in Munich a few days ago, I discussed the perception of space in Grímnismál. This paper is a continuation of those thoughts of mine, exploring some new elements. For this to make some sense, however, I shall start by outlining my ideas on the words of Grímnismál and the sources that support these views of mine. To begin with, I would like to stress that this discussion of mine wishes to come to conclusions only about what the author of Grímnismál and the people from the region and time period believed in. A large number of scholars have discussed the shifting identity of paganism, and I'm not claiming anything universal for either the Scandinavian or Germanic-speaking world in general. When one thinks of Scandinavian cosmology, this image, or any similar form of it, springs to mind. This cosmological map was first produced by Finnur Magnusson in the 19th century, and it has been followed by scholars as well as by popular culture up to today. The two main literary sources for the mythological material of the Norse-speaking peoples are the Elder Edda and the Snorre Edda, both of which survive in 13th century manuscripts from Iceland, produced more than 200 years after the Icelanders converted to Christianity. The Snorre Edda was composed by a Christian who used the Elder Edda to compose it, but did not practice or know the religion himself. As such, using it as a source can prove to be very problematic. In essence, Snorri was a scholar just like ourselves. These overly complicated cosmological images shown in these slides are a example of all information gained from looking not only at the Eddic poems, but also the Snorre Edda. By looking only at Grímnismál, however, the main Eddic poem that relates to cosmology, this image quickly becomes clearer. Following the traditional reading, Grímnismál starts in the words of humans. More specifically, it starts in the abode of King Geirröður. From there, Grímnir starts giving a list of the different worlds and the gods that reside in them. Later on, a large list of river names is also given. Moreover, a number of other mythological elements, mainly relating to Valhalla and Yggdrasil, are mentioned. Lastly, a description of the creation of the world from Ymir's flesh. The list of the words enumerated by Grímnir usually make us think of completely different and separated spatial landscapes. Heimr is the most common word used for most of these places, and by looking at Cliffy Vigfússon, the Icelandic dictionary, one sees that Heimr can also mean abode, village, land, region, instead of solely world. Supporting this view is also the part of the prologue to Grímnismál, where Odin sits of Hlivskjalfur and sees over Heima Atla, all Heimurs. Etymologically, Heimr has Slavonic cognates with the meaning of household. I think I'm going too fast. This is what you were supposed to see earlier, I apologize. Etymologically, Heimr has Slavonic cognates with the meaning of household, dwelling place. And in both Sanskrit and Latin, we've got words with an ultimate sense of lying, being in a place. But the closest translation of Heimr is probably found in Greek ikoumeni, the translation of which is similarly problematic in English, but with an ultimate sense of an inhabited region.
Do you need to go back one?
No, I think I was supposed to be.
Okay, sorry. Oops.
Sorry, I lost. Lastly, it is worth noting that a number of place names in the inhabited world of the humans had the Heimr suffix. Trondheimr in Norway and Alfheimr in the Swedish province of Bohuslän are examples of that. Following this etymological approach, one can see why I argue that all these words are actually different mythological regions that are part of a single unified world. To support this view of mine comes Grímnismál itself, stanza 29. Thor, whom we know from stanza 4 lives in Thrudheimr, has to cross coherent, and the two Kjörleidar to reach the ash of Yggdrasil. This implies that wherever Thor is coming from, which presumably is Thrudheimr, is divided from Yggdrasil by rivers. Furthermore, in stanza 30, the gods have to write Glader, Gitlir, Gler, Skidbrimir, Silfintopr, Sinir, Gisl, Falhopnir, Gutltopr, and Jetfjell in order to reach the ash of Yggdrasil. Which gods the poet is talking about is not made clear. But in both these cases, the image that is evolved is of different regions divided by rivers, with Yggdrasil possibly in the middle. Taking all of this into consideration, I argue that this one world of the gods, along with all its different mythological landscapes, could be, and likely is, the world of human habitation. To begin with, Yggdrasil, which we know from the aforementioned stanzas to be part of the world of the gods, is also part of the world of humans, as delineated in stanza 31, where mankind resides underneath one of the roots of Yggdrasil, with Hel and the Hrimthursar underneath the other two. For by, in stanza 1441, where the description of the creation of the world is discussed, Midgardr, middle enclosure, is shaped out of the brows of Ymir, while the earth was shaped from his flesh. One can easily picture the brows being used to make an enclosure as part of the flesh, and it makes more sense to me than thinking of the brows and flesh as completely different worlds. I shall now open Pandora's box. I'm going to use those now to support my views. Why would you do this to yourself, Vittorio, you may ask? I can offer no sane answer. I spent a good deal of pages in my thesis trying to discuss the likelihood of Thorsdrapa and Grímnismál being related. There is no time to do this now. Instead, I would like to quote its second stanza, the 74th found in Skaldskap. Gjelstranga get göngu, gamle for skemmu, fistus kteira trista, dot nidju, sikvitja. Taurer hadven judunur gördisk, gamvikur skåtum rikri, endrut limsa kinder, idja sets platridja. Other than boasting my reading skills here, I would like to focus on the canon Gandvikur Skåtum. It literally can be translated as of the Scots of Gandvikur. Gandvikur literally translates as the Bay of the Wizard's Staff, and in this case, as a place name, it refers to the White Sea. The Scots of Gandvikur are Jötnar. Mythological beings similar to gods, I would like to remind you that Skadi, mentioned in Grímnismál itself, is a Jötun. Jötnar are explicitly stated to reside on the far east of the Scandinavian peninsula. This canon, therefore, which also belongs to a poem likely, at least to my mind, related to Grímnismál, supports my views of gods, other supernatural beings, and men residing in the same world. The image painted by this approach is much clearer. The gods and the mythological landscapes were part of this very world that we, the humans, live in. Just as the Greek gods resided in Mount Olympus, the Scandinavian ones resided somewhere here. And just as Olympus was off limits because of its difficulty in being climbed, the abodes of the gods were somewhere outside the enclosure that is Midgard. I wish to now take this idea and further test it by looking at other sources and compare them with Grímnismál. There will be a case study focused on the Old Testament and one of the Christian and medieval beliefs of on the nature of the rainbow. Before starting, I would like to stress that I am no expert in neither the Old Testament nor whichever field it is that deals with rainbows. I have focused most of my academic life on Old Norse or Germanic related texts. As such, not only would I ask anyone with more knowledge on these topics to give me ideas and comments, but also apologize if you find that I have not used some things you would consider particularly important in this topic. I shall start with the Old Testament. In Genesis chapter 2, verses 9 to 14, we read the following, worth reading out in its entirety. And I quote, "And out of the ground made the Lord to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight, and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And the river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted, and became into 4 heads. The name of the first is Pishon, and that is it which compasseth the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold. And the gold of that land is good. There is bdellium and the onyx stone. And the name of the second river is Gihon. The same is it that encompasseth the whole land of Ethiopia. And the name of the third river is Hitteket. That is it which goes towards the east of Assyria. And the fourth river is Euphrates." End of quote. The image we get of the Garden of Eden is the following. It is a terrestrial paradise, with 4 rivers surrounding and enclosing it. I would now like to turn to Bede's commentary on Genesis. Bede discusses the tree of life, and I quote, "And indeed, the tree of life was so called, because it received by divine agency this virtue, as I have said, that he who ate from it, his body would be strengthened by enduring health, nor would it ever be altered by any infirmity or age into a worse state or slip into death." End of quote. One might be tempted to compare Yggdrasil, or the apples of Eden, with this tree of life. Having already fallen to such traps myself while drafting my master's dissertation, I would argue against it. Most, if not all, cultures and religions in the world have shown the importance of trees. This is something that I should not expand here, since the digression would take more than 3 hours. But I would just stress how similarities do not necessarily mean a common source, nor do they mean that one was influenced by the other. What is important here for my discussion are the rivers. Beef proceeds with analyzing them, and I quote, "For the Nile, which waters Egypt, is Gihon itself, which is in the following verses it is said to flow out from paradise. So too, by those same cities of Sodom that were destroyed." He goes on, "The source of Gihon, which they now call the Ganges, is certainly in the region of the Caucasus Mountain. The source of the Nile, which as I have said is called Gihon in scripture, is not far from the Atlas Mountain, which is the ultimate limit of Africa towards the west. Then, the source of the Tigris and Euphrates is out of Armenia." Lastly, discussing Euphrates, Bede says the following. With regard to the Euphrates, it does not say where it flows or what lands it encompasses, because, since it flows in the vicinity of the Promised Land, it could readily be known by the people of Israel, who were going to read those words settled in that very place. Unquote. Bede's interpretation, which uses the help of Augustine's work as well, helps us paint a very realistic image of heaven on earth and place it in a very specific region. Let us now return to Grímnismál 29. The image that one can generate is very similar, and the following conclusions can be made in my mind. The composer of Grímnismál knew the Bible well enough to emulate this description while composing Yggdrasil. Or the religious beliefs themselves had been affected by Christianity by the time Grímnismál was composed. However, a further conclusion can be made, and this is the one I choose to focus on here. Whichever of the two aforementioned conclusions is true, the composer of Grímnismál thought Yggdrasil to be present in the world of human habitation. Thor, in order to reach the ash of Yggdrasil, the central part of Norse cosmology, has to cross coherent, and the two coherent. The similarities are striking. Not only is Yggdrasil, just like Eden, enclosed by rivers, but the number agrees as well. Thus, Thrudheimr is present in the same world as Yggdrasil, and therefore the world of human habitation. A further support to my view of gods and humans living in Earth, but the humans being enclosed in Midgard, comes from the famed Bifröst, mentioned in stanza 44, in which Bifröst is said to be the best of bridges. Now, Bifröst, which is also called Bifröst in some other sources, is thought to refer to the rainbow. This is exactly how Clisby Vigfusson translated in the dictionary, for instance. Ausgeir Magnusson, in his etymological dictionary, also translates it as rainbow, and tentatively traced the etymology of Bifröst to trembling path, and Bifröst to the colorful path. Alternatively, Rudolf Simek says that Bifröst is, quote, probably related to Old Norse bil, moment, weak point, and is possibly the original name of the bridge to heaven, unquote. Simek also connects it to the rainbow. In his entry for Bifröst, Simek writes that the Vris's connection of Bifröst to the Milky Way instead of the rainbow is highly unlikely. My understanding is that our connection of Bifröst to the rainbow might have been heavily influenced by Snorri's statement that it is indeed the rainbow. However, for this following hypothesis, I shall keep such a definition for Bifröst, asking you to bear in mind that I am not convinced 100% on its meaning. If Bifröst is indeed the rainbow, then I would urge you to picture a rainbow. Sorry, picture an actual rainbow. Rainbows start somewhere on Earth and finish somewhere on Earth too. Yet, no matter how one might try to reach the beginning or end of the rainbow, they shall ultimately and utterly fail to do so. The reason for this is simple: physics. As highly developed as the Norse understanding of the world might have been, we have no reason to believe that they had understood the way a rainbow works. Its unapproachability possibly made it a matter of wonder and awe. Now, to think about the bridge of the gods, we do know that Bifröst is some form of bridge, thanks to stanza 44 of Grímnismál. Humans cannot use it, but gods can. Its starting point could be in the part of the earth that is Midgard, while its ending point could be outside said enclosure, and thus in the part of the world inhabited by the gods and other human beings. If Bifröst is indeed the rainbow, Why should we picture it the way that Snorri describes it, changing its shape into an actual bridge to the heavens, when it could actually be the actual rainbow? This would support my hypothesis on the gods residing in this world of ours. I would now like to draw some comparisons with medieval Christian and earlier writings about the rainbow, and see whether one can draw any conclusions about Grímnismál in a similar fashion to my comparisons to the Genesis passage and the Grímnismál stanza. I'm very thankful to Helen Foxell Forbes, who has done work on this subject and very kindly helped me with sources. To begin with, Genesis itself, in chapter 9, verse 13, calls the rainbow an arcus, bow, arc, and states it being a connection between God and earth. Furthermore, Pliny, in Historia Naturalis, discusses the shape of the rainbow, saying how it is only a timidia circuli, semicircle. Bede, in the Tabernaculo, says that the rainbow trailing 1300 varios verso sole colores, 1,000 different colors before the sun. This image is heavily reminding of one of the etymologies given to Grímnismál, colorful path. Looking at these texts, I end up making different conclusions. One is that Snorri, in explicitly stating that Grímnismál is indeed the rainbow, had been influenced by Christian texts. Just like God is connected to earth through the rainbow, the gods would have been connected to Mediæval through Grímnismál. Another conclusion would be that the composer of Grímnismál, and possibly his beliefs, had been influenced by Christian views. A third conclusion could be that the similarities are coincidental. If that were the case, I would invite you to think of Thor as the god of thunder and rain, the rainbow appearing after rain comes. And Thor using it as a bridge to travel to and from Midgard to other places. Unfortunately, it seems to me that with the sources and the amount of information we have of Grímnismál, no definitive answer can be made on its nature. However, comparisons with both Roman and Christian sources help show that the shape of the rainbow was indeed an arcus, as we both know through our powers of vision, with both ends being on different parts of the earth. Concluding, I would reiterate the sources I analyzed. Grímnismál, on its own, gives the reader no reason to expect a different worlds or heaven in which deities and other mythological beings reside. Our expectation of such a thing is brought to us not only by readings of Snorri's works, but also the scholarship of the past 2 centuries. Such a view can further be strengthened by looking at older material, such as Thorstrapa, composed in the 10th century, and even analogues and influences by Christianity, as seen by Genesis in the Old Testament and the nature of rainbows. My research plans are to now take this view even further and test it with more texts other than the Snorri Edda, and see whether this cosmological map that I have painted for Grímnismál could have been more widespread in Scandinavian beliefs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vittorio, and welcome to the Life After paper. I'm sure there's going to be lots of lovely questions, so would you like to start? Questions from the floor? Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much for a really very interesting and occasionally also very funny paper. I mean, putting on cell phone or tombstone, that was a first. I was just wondering, when you were talking about these places in Grímnismál, if you're aware of an article by Oskaut Steines, who has actually discussed, because there are some, I think it's verse of stanza 5 and 6 that mention some places in Grímnismál that he has connected to a place in present-day southeast Norway in Tuna.
So basically, not just that article, I know which article, very interesting article, but more or less almost half of the places mentioned in Grímnismál are present around Scandinavia. We have, well, Alfheimr does not mean the same thing, but it's written the exact same way. But we also have Coherent and Coherent, 2 of the rivers I mentioned in that stanza. I was told last week are islands somewhere in western Norway. We have rivers. Yesterday, Rin was mentioned as a rhyme. Vinau could be thought as the Dvina in Arkhangelsk. I think that's very interesting, and in my mind, that shows that I don't see why we would choose, we as the Scandinavians, I'm obviously Scandinavian, we would choose to use a mythological name that they thought would be in a different world, in a different heaven. It sounds a bit preposterous maybe to me, I'm not sure. To me, the usage of the same place names is a very good support to them being just place names. Not place names that were actually named and seen somewhere, but I just remembered, last week Jonas Wellendorf gave a paper on exactly this in Munich, and he was saying how this usage of mythological names in actual place names, or the opposite, because we don't really know what happens, and he gave some really nice ideas, most of which I do not remember at the moment. I'm stressed, sorry.
Yes.
Actually, it's not really a question, it's just a comment on this sort of idea of place names as being sort of definitely connected to a sort of ritual significance, or whatever you want to call it, cosmological or landscape significance. It was just a point I wanted to make that I was going through some of the Icelandic land registers a while ago, and I found two very poor tenant farms located on a larger farm, which are called Paradise and Hell. So both of them were deserted. Yeah, maybe there's not always that strong connection.
Emphasis for imminence there for you. Any further questions? Yes.
It's just a comment. I will be a bit wary of saying that necessarily, because our world and the mythological world overlap. They need to be so distinct. It's very common around several world mythologies. They need to be so distinct, and I don't know. It does not necessarily mean for me that because the rainbow is an arch, that means that it ends in the same world, because that assumes that their idea of world is very similar to us and physically based. And the same about the overlapping of things. The overlapping is extremely common in world mythologies. A good number of examples. That the overlapping of mythological and real world names do not necessarily mean that the words are apart. I will be a bit less clear in the distinction between this is mythological, this is our world. It's fairly common that these worlds actually overlap, and the categories are not so neat.
I fear I might have been misunderstood a bit, because
that's why.
On one hand, the reason I did not mention these similarities in place names like Rin or Alfheim or all these things is exactly this reason. Whereas it's very interesting, I do not think that I do not use that as my main support to my view, because as you said, we have this usage a lot everywhere. That doesn't mean anything necessarily. It is a nice extra support, but very tangential, marginal, not main. Same goes for the rainbow. My idea that there was no different heaven, not a heaven to begin with, did not come from my thought of the rainbow. That was a later addition that I actually thought about very recently as an extra support. Obviously, using it as a sole source is not enough, and very easily the rainbow could go somewhere else. But thinking about it, taking everything else into consideration, I think it is an extra support to this.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Vittorio.